This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to the I Saved You, Now Do the Dishes podcast. I'm author and speaker Carrie Severson. In each episode, I'll share stories and tips from my experience with caregiving and advocacy through my husband's cancer journey. Hi, welcome back to the I Saved You, Now Do the Dishes podcast. Thanks for being here. I recognized last time that I talk a lot about cancer, and that's my experience caregiving. But I want to acknowledge you as a family caregiver may not have anything to do with cancer. Your experience may have something totally different. I hope that what I'm sharing still resonates with you in terms of trauma recovery, burnout recovery, advocating, speaking up, taking the reins, controlling as much as we can control, even though, the reality is we don't control much in this scenario. Today I wanted to really sort of expand and talk about pain management. I'm sure people who are working with their caregiving for their parents or their adult children, maybe pain management is something that resonates more than cancer. I've said before that I was a really big fan of the whiteboards. We had 3 whiteboards. The first one was actually as big as the sign behind me if you're on YouTube watching this or social media. It was a calendar. I color coordinated it. Gavin hated it. I loved it. Come the end of his experience, he actually ripped the whiteboard calendar off the wall, threw it away. And then once he, what is that? Spackle? Once he fixed the holes in the wall from the screws and touched it up, he put a whiteboard back up, but it's clear. It's really hard to write on. I do not like it, but that's how much he hated the whiteboard. He couldn't stand having it in the house after cancer. But I was a really big fan of it. I also had a whiteboard for pain management and a whiteboard for his calories. Come week 4 was his halfway mark. Valentine's Day 2024 was his halfway mark. By that point, he was on instant oxy, gabapentin, Tylenol, ibuprofen, lidocaine, and magic mouthwash. He was in a lot of pain. And Valentine's Day, his halfway mark, something really changed. I say that all the time, something changed. It started to go downhill because his treatment, his treatment was Monday through Friday radiation, chemotherapy once a week. And the radiation would compile upon one another. And they said that a lot. So by week 4, he'd had 20 radiation sessions and he was feeling each and every one of them. It's not like after, the 5th one, you don't feel the first one. It just gets more intense and more intense and more intense. So come week 4, he was like, I think I've had enough. I bet cancer's gone. I'm sure it's fine. I was really hoping that we were over this, having to will him pray that he finished. But that week he really wanted to quit. So on Valentine's Day, after his radiation session, that was pretty much the only thing we had to do that day. Actually, last minute, I scheduled an infusion because he was really struggling to get water down. And in our meeting with the PA earlier that week, I'd said that. And, Gavin's like, I get water down. You see me drink. And I'm like, you drink maybe 30 ounces of water a day, 2 bottles of water. You're supposed to be drinking a lot more than that, but it hurt to drink. He was not consuming enough calories. It was constant. We were constantly arguing about this. And his process was, because he was constantly being scolded for his lack of drinking, his lack of liquid and food, he would squeeze lidocaine into his mouth, swish with magic mouthwash, and spit it both out. Wait 10 minutes, take 3 gabapentins, wait a little bit, take an oxy, and then he would eat or drink, preferably both. But he had been on oxy for 2 weeks at that point, and it was really, it worked, but it didn't work as well as it did in the beginning. And this is the really dangerous part, the pain management component, which is why, it's so frustrating and so consuming how people in the United States, how family caregivers do this after a full-time job is beyond me. And I pray family caregivers get more support this year. They need it. So Valentine's Day comes. I take a picture of kind of joke, in sickness and in health. Here we've said our vows so many times at that point because we got married September of 2020 on a deck in the middle of nowhere, and then had a vow renewal 2021. I joke a lot that we said vows twice by the time he had cancer, and said in sickness and in health, for better or worse. But the idea of supporting someone while they're sick as a newly married couple, we were married 3 years when it happened. I don't know if that's considered new anymore, but in sickness and in health felt 50 years away, not 3. But so he does radiation, he does his infusion, and he wants to go to a fish store to walk around as something different, get some steps in, and he wanted to buy something for the fish tank to celebrate Valentine's Day. The fish tank is his thing. I could care less. I think the fish are pretty, but I don't care. All right, cool. Let's do it. Something new. It took 30 minutes for him to walk around this little tiny store. He looked at everything. I gave him a lot of space. He was really enjoying himself. At that point, he couldn't really talk much. There was a lot of charades going on, a lot of one-word communication. The sores in his neck, the scabs in his throat were so big at that point. The burns inside his neck were just nasty. On the outside of his neck, by week 4, they were definitely moving into the category of needing to be dressed and treated. I don't know if they were a 2nd degree burn by week 4, but they were 2nd degree burn by week 5. He looked like the Walking Dead. It was nasty. It would bleed and then scab and then bleed and then be raw in other places. And if we were, gratefully we were alone in the fish store, but had there been somebody else, I imagine they would have stared at him. But he found these two little cute characters, a cowboy and a cowgirl, and he hands me the cowgirl and he pretends they're kissing. And then he kind of does a little wiggle and he wiggles his eyebrows. It was kind of cute. And that was my Valentine's present, cowgirl. We come home, he crashes out and in bed. And not long after, I hear him moaning and some struggle in the bedroom. He's rolling around and he starts coughing up ropes of mucus. And this would happen a lot where a side effect of having radiation done on your neck, in your throat, on your jawline is, there's a specific medical term for it, but essentially it was like a really gross amount of mucus. And Gavin's would come out in these gigantic ropes. They would catch in his throat. He would choke. And as he was like coughing them up and pulling them out of his mouth, they would catch scabs and blood clots. And it was just globs of blood everywhere. It was just nasty. All over the bathroom. But he was soaking wet from sweat and he was shivering. And those are signs to call the doctor. So I do what I can. I help him get changed. I clean up as much as I can so he's not like walking in blood and moving it all over the house. I call into the doctor and shared the symptoms, took his temperature. It was just, low grade fever. And then shared all the drugs that he was on. And then they asked how much is left, how much oxy is left, how much gabapentin is left, how much magic mouthwash is left. And then they were like, he's not using both the lidocaine and the magic mouthwash, is he? I'm like, yeah, he is. And they were like, well, you really should only be using one or the other. And I'm like, well, he can either do everything he can to eliminate as much pain as possible so he can get water into his body, to get food into his body, or I can tell him that you want him to stop taking something. So which one is it? Because he needs all these things to drink, to eat, and he's barely doing that. He's in so much pain. Eliminating something that is helping him, trying to reduce the pain, doesn't seem like the smart thing to do here. So at that point, the doctor's like, all right, well, let's keep the oxy at 10 milligrams, but instead of taking it every 4 hours, have him take it every 2 hours. I'm essentially a drug dealer at this point, knowing my husband's going to become addicted to it because it's the only thing that is taking a little bit of edge off. And now he's doing it every 2 hours. Oh my God. That does not, I agreed because he needed something then. But I'm like, and the doctor that I was calling into was not his regular doctor. It's just the person that you call when you have an emergency. I'm like, there's something, we need help here. So before I gave him another oxy, he immediately falls asleep. I give him some water, we dress his wound. And at this point, the stuff that they gave us was actually aggravating his burn even more because this is something else. The stuff that you're given for free at the hospital or whatever, it typically there's an agreement between the pharmaceutical company and the hospital, right? It's not always necessarily what's best for the patient. Gavin had really bad burns and they gave him something with alcohol in it. So we had to find something that worked. Eventually, a girlfriend of mine was like, you should ask for silver. Silver is used in burn departments. It doesn't have alcohol in it. So I asked for it at that point when that day, actually, Valentine's Day, his neck was just an open wound. It just would not scab, blood all over the pillowcases. So after talking to the on-call doctor and getting the note to increase his oxy frequency, I put a call in to his medical team, the radiologist specifically saying, we need something other than this short-term oxy. We need to discuss his next level of pain management here. And I'm done putting alcohol in my husband's open wound. There's got to be something else here. The reason I wanted to talk about it is because in addition to managing the symptoms and the calendar and, his weight and all these other things that we have to do, being I don't even know the right word here, proactive, I guess, in looking down the road and figuring out what's next in terms of pain management so that we're not constantly chasing relief is something that I really wish I would have done, because by the time he needed the next level of pain management, I should have had it on the counter. There was a conversation that should have happened a week before we really needed it. When they gave him this cream to put on his neck, I should have said, what do the burn patients use? Because he's not a typical radiation burn patient. His skin is falling off here. They're not blisters. They're not sunburns. This is different. There's so much for us to manage, regardless of how you're supporting your person or what you're supporting your person through. Being proactive in pain management is part of the game, part of the journey. Get yourself a whiteboard. I actually got him one of those gigantic pill dispensers with like 5 rows. That week, I had done it several weeks before. That week was really the last week I could use it, because moving into week 5, everything changed. I say that all the time, but it really was like every week was a new thing. If you are a family caregiver managing all the things and pain management, know that I'm thinking of you. I'm sending you a lot of love. I hope you are totally supported. And if nothing else, please ask someone else to do the dishes. Until next time.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.